ko dakpaan mamun saloba aling atako manjawa ne Daud agana.
Whoever does these things will never be shaken.
Ayang ko dakpan mamun saloba aling atako manjawa.
And in some ways our desire is, God, how can I be a person who is not shaken?
Aro ansi sakantini gisko skani yong nananggen iso madakya ba mamun chibol yata ni ko magisa jangitang na mangen.
God, how can I be a person who continues to shine brightly for you in difficult times?
Oi so ya namen ningnat big ba sal somarango anga maika nangna tingsu jrenge jangitang na mangen.
And as I look at Psalm 15, I want to leave you with just 2 lessons this morning.
Ya pruni ba ko ansin gitang number chibonga ko ningon ana simana mangani skirani ko donang na skinga.
Number 1,
skangpa
as you look at verse 1,
pot sako nigen simode
the psalmist David talks about intimacy with God.
Yano git ko segba Daud isol baksa nang tuwe nang rume jangitani managaniya.
And then from verses 2 to 5, he talks about integrity in our lives.
Uri zamano pot kanine pot pona porade wano isolni aro mandeni kanyo kakhet onge jangitani managaniya.
As I look at Psalm 15,
ya gita number chibonga ko niyon.
here's what I'd like to suggest to you this morning.
Yara katarang ko na simano ya prengo aganaska.
If we don't have intimacy with God,
Anseng isol baksa nang tuwe bakra nang rume jangitani dongjao de.
we will never have integrity in the way we live our lives.
Ansini jangitani isolni aro mandeni kano kakhet ongani dongjawa.
The psalmist David says,
Git ko segba Daud agana.
this is a man, this is a woman who will never be shaken.
Ya nakaba miya, ya nakaba misik, mamang salba leya tako
A
manjawa.
man, a woman who longs for intimacy with God.
Je miya misikan isol baksa nang tuwe nang rume jangitang na skani donga.
And as you walk in that intimacy with God,
Aro nang isol baksa nang tuwe nang rume jangitangon.
you begin to live a life of integrity.
Nara isol ni aro mandeni kani ba kakhet onge jangitang na abachinga.
When I think of the themes that were given to me this particular year,
Ya bersio ang naunat kapa sa pangchakani gaman nga chanchingon.
they were themes about integrity.
Ya ang naunat kapa skina unat kaparango ya isol ni aro mandeni kani kakhet onge jangitam skina ngani ang
How
donga.
can I be relevant in changing times?
Ya dentang roning ba sal sumarang ara maike meli maga pe jangitang na
And
mangen.
I want to tell you again this morning that the problem is not with the times.
Ya prungan asimana changsata yakanaska ya ning nakani de dentang roning ba gasak ni gamanongja.
The problem is with my intimacy with God.
Andi ba ning nakani de angni isol baksa nang tue jangitani dongjani musonga.
When every man, every woman, every boy, every girl in the Garo Hills begins to walk an intimate walk with Jesus Christ,
Jen salo chikaso nongpa miya pa misukma aro chadam berang isol baksa nage nang tue nang rume jangitang na abachingode.
the Garo Hills will never be the same again.
Chikasong pang naba apsan taizawa.
Look with me at verse 1.
Pot sako ang baksa ni pabo.
This is what David says.
Daud ndagi agana.
David is addressing God,
Daud isol na yako agani
and he
yatsu.
asks a question.
Arwa singani mungsako singaha.
He says, Lord,
Wagana Jehovah.
who may dwell in your sacred tent?
Nani dong chakaniyo sawa dong pagen.
Lord, who may dwell in your holy mountain?
Agatel nani rong chal kapa brio sawa dong kamgen.
As I think about that verse over and over again,
Ya pot ni gamana chang ni pul tai tai chanchiyo.
that verse is a reflection of David's desire.
Ya pot tera Daud ni khatong mais kanirang dunga uko misoking atsam.
David is asking God,
Daud isolo nagi binga.
God, who is the man who can dwell in your sacred tent?
Isol sawa nangni rongthal kapa thambu dongna mangen.
Who is the man who can dwell upon your holy mountain?
Nangni rongthal kapa brio sawa dong kamgen.
When you think about what David is saying here,
Daud maiko agania yano agania unimun sanchio de.
David is saying 2 things.
Daud mengani katarang ko
He
agania.
says, number 1, God,
Wa agania skang about
I
isol.
want to think about the present of my life.
Wa agania angni janggithani ongenimun sanchinaska.
In the present of my life,
Angni janggithani somayo.
God, I want to dwell in your sacred tent.
Anga nangni rongthal kapa thambuo nangni nokko dongnaska.
When you talk about the sacred tent, this is something that is temporary.
Ya rongthal kapa nokpa thambu ne agani on yara detik sana dongai kapa kusa maksonga.
And David is saying, God, in this temporary season of my life, I want to have a close relationship with you.
Aro dautaran kagani cham yangni yaksako detik sana jangi thangani yo. Nang baksa nang tuwe nang reme jangi thangdaska.
And secondly, David says in that particular verse,
Aro gani kapa daut ya apsan photon yakwa kana.
God, I am not satisfied with just a temporary closeness with you.
Wa kana isol anang bakse aga sakgo mangmang detik sa nang reme jangi thani mangmang skani
I
ongja.
want to have a permanent closeness with you, O God.
Anga nang baksa jrengrop nan dongkham naska oiso.
When he talks about the holy mountain,
Jen salo wa rongthal kapa braining managani ache.
he is talking about something that is eternal.
Wa break wa kani on mai ba phabai kham kapa nim sagania.
So if you look at verse 1,
Ringaman na pot sakoni ode.
this is what David is saying.
Daud tari yakwa kani acham.
He says, God,
Wa kani iso.
I have one desire,
Ango mangsa mangmang beni na.
and this is the desire of my heart.
Aro angni khathong ni beni ari yanga.
In my present,
Nang angni dau yano jangi thani
I
ho.
want to have an intimate relationship with you.
Nang baksa nang tuwe nang reme jangi thangdaska.
God, that intimate relationship with you,
Arwe nang tuwe nang baksa jangi thani sonongja.
I want it to be a permanent relationship, oh God.
Wa nang baksa nang remani kora dreng drop na bai kham kapa wataska.
When you read the life of David,
Daudi jangi thani ko ansing porayo de.
over and over again,
Chang ni chang.
you find David longing for closeness with God.
Daud tara chang ni chang isol baksa nang remme jangi thana skani ko agana.
I want us to look at 4 verses this morning.
Ya prini bakwa sa chung ko mengbri pot rang ko niat na nang deka.
Number 1,
Skang pa.
Psalm 27.
Git rang number kolgrix ni.
Look with me at verse 4.
Pot bri ko ni bo.
This is what David says.
Daud kya no de kya agana.
One thing I ask from the Lord,
Anga mangsa ko Jehovah biyaha.
this only do I seek,
Uko anga amgen.
that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life.
Mai kay ang ni jangi tani sarang depet anga Jehovah ni noko dong naman gen.
Gaze on the beauty of the Lord,
Jehovah ni nito ako ni na ne.
and to seek him in his temple.
Aru ni torom noko niye chanchina ne.
When did David say these words?
Ya katarang ko daw tara may nako sumay agan ha.
David said these words even before he became the king.
Daud ya katarang ko uni raja ungas kangan agana.
He was running from Saul.
Wa sumarang wa sol ni ko sot na mani na
And in
katinga
the
chen.
midst of that difficult time,
Aru ya nakapaning nakbegapa o bosra ni jatchio.
David says, God, there is only one thing I desire.
Daud agana ang ni kathong ni beni de mangsa
There is
sa.
only one thing I ask from you, O God,
Oy sol agana uni ko mangsa kusan biya.
that I may dwell in the house of the Lord.
Jera ko nga nang ninok ko dong naman gen.
Look at the words David is using in Psalm 27.
Ya gitra number 4 ni Daud ni jakal ka pa katarang ko ni bo.
God, that I may dwell in your house,
Nang ninok ko dong naman gen ne kana.
that I may gaze on your beauty,
Mai ka nga nang ni tuani ko ni naman gen ne kana.
that I may seek you in your temple
Nang ni thorom noko nang ko am gen ne kana.
all the days of my life.
Ang ni jangi ta sarang juga gamako.
You know, today is a beautiful day.
Nasimang uyama ya salar namen nambay ka pa salonga.
It's such a windy day today, and it's really difficult to speak in so many ways.
Dalde balwa baljip chepe ani gaman agan at naman namen nengna ka nenginga.
But it's a sunny day as well.
Ani ba dalara sal rak pa salbonga.
And every time I think of the sun,
Aru changan tianga ya sal ni gaman senchion.
I always think about one lesson.
Anga pangnan mangsa skira ani de ko skira.
On a bright day, if you look at the sun,
nege sal dengmat dengon a sal ko niode
and then come into a room,
ne jamna khuturi ona napode
all of a sudden you become blind.
bakan nara khana gata mamu ko banukna
You have
manja
eyes but you cannot see.
namo makronang donga di bana nukna manja
And that's exactly what David is saying in Psalm 27.
aro yanda ko obosta kon git rang kolrex new daud agania
God, my desire is that I may gaze upon your beauty, O God.
angni skaniera nangni ni chua ko nina oi sol ne agana
God, my desire is that I might dwell in your holy
oi
hill,
sol angni skania nang dong thal ka pa brio dongna
that I may seek you in your temple, O God.
nangni chorom no ko ngang ko amna ne agana
Turn with me to Psalm 63.
git rang sotok katha mona ang baksa badal bo
As David in Psalm 63 would say in verse 1,
git rang sotok katha ni pot sao daud agana
this is what David would say:
yano daud ya ko agana
You are my God.
oi sol nangni sol
Earnestly I seek you.
gisik nang nge angan ang ko amgen
I thirst for you.
angni jangi nakna getok ranna
My whole being longs for you.
angni bm nakna kapaka
In a dry and a parched land where there is no water.
shigri gapa arang gapa ro sibok gapa songo gata ne agana
When does David write this psalm?
ya git kora daud basa ko sia ha
David is now the king.
ya ko sia ni somayo de daud tara raja nga ha
His son Absalom has rebelled against him.
ar was somayo uni depande absalom uni khosako chakati acham
David is running from Absalom.
aro daud antani depande absalom na kene khatding acham
He finds himself in the wilderness.
aro niki wa bakra ban bangongi acham
And this is what he's saying to God.
aro ya khatarang krosa daud isol na gania
God,
wa gania isol
earnestly I seek you, God.
anga gisnangi nang kwamgen
My whole being longs for you, O God.
ani jangi nang nagtok rana
Like dry land upon which water is poured, and that land drinks in the water. God, that's how I long for you.
shigri go paro rangap paro sibok pa sungota wanda ki anga nang komanas ka ne
My
agana
soul and my body, they long for you, O God.
ani jangi arang ni ben nang komanas ka isol ne agana
This morning, let me ask you a question.
ya prengo ana ko mengsas ngani ko siklas ka
When was the last time you longed for God like David longed for the presence of God?
nangni giskrainga the pet daud che dake isol ko manas be grapa gata nangni grapa nira pasako
Before he becomes the king, he is longing for intimacy with God.
wa raja unas khang bawa isol baksa nang thue nang reme jangi thangdas ka
As he runs from Absalom, he is seeking for intimacy with God.
wa absalom na khene khatsu joi jangi thang matungo ba wa isol baksa nang thue nang reme jangi thangdas ka
Psalm 143.
git rang number ratsasa sotpri gatham
David has now failed God. David has now failed God.
daud isol ni nakanyo wa gakahacham
He has sinned against God.
wa isol ni kosako pap ka
He's
ha
committed adultery.
wa thleka ni pap ko ka ha
He has murdered.
wa sot ka pa mande sot ka pa ha
And as God forgives David,
aro ya pap rang ni isol daud ko kema ka
in Psalm 143,
git rang number sasa sotpri
in
gathamo
verse 6,
pot doko
this is what David says.
daud ya khatharang ko agan ha
I spread out my hand to you, O God.
nangna ang ni jak rang ko nga badala isol
I thirst for you, O God.
angan ang korang naska
I thirst for you like the parched land, O God.
ningan ya sung datang ni zangi nang nakapaka
You see, as you look at David,
anseng daud kun yaton
all through his life,
uni jangi thani plak sarangon
David is longing for intimacy with God.
daud isol baksa nang chuwe nang remme jangi
Longing
tangska
for a closeness with God.
wa isol baksa chap jangi tangska
He is longing for the presence of God.
wa isol ni antang baksa dongpani na wa kauksia
We want to look at just one last verse.
Bon kami anseng pot samang ko igen.
Very, very familiar verse.
Anseng gemet ni wi gapa anseni porai rong pat sasuni pa.
Look with me at Psalm 23.
Git rang number kogre katam ko ang baksa ni
This
pa
is
ko.
the psalm where the psalmist David says, "The Lord is my shepherd."
Ya giton Daud Jehovah nir ko pong ani akan gapa gitonga.
Now David is an old man.
Daud tara bude pong aha.
He's getting close to the point of his death.
Wa sina se pang aha.
And he says these words.
Arwa ya katarang ko akan aha.
Psalm 23 and verse 6.
Git rang number kogre katam
He
poto.
says, "Surely goodness and love will follow me
Wa kana beben namani ro kasai dakani angko jaraken.
all the days of my life."
Angni jangi tani sarang depet.
And then note what David says.
Uni zamano Daud mai ko kana kuni bo.
"And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever."
Aro anga dreng na keng Jehovah ni noko dong kamgen.
See, as you look at David,
Ansing Daud ko niya ton.
David constantly longs for intimacy with God.
Daud dreng nan isol baksa ng tuwe ng reme jangi tang na gani ba kaok siya ni donga.
As I think about David's intimacy with God,
Anga Daud ni isol baksa ng tuwe ng reme jangi tang man san siya ton.
I think about 4 lessons.
Anga mengberi ko skira.
1,
Skanga pa.
David is persistent in his intimacy with God.
Wa Daud isol baksa ng tuwe ng reme jangi tanganyo jot keng daka.
Before he became the king,
Wa rajang nas kang ba.
while he was the king,
Wa rajang aho
when he
ba.
was running from Absalom,
Wa Absalom na kini kat
in
matu
his
ba.
difficult time,
Uni neng nagpe ka ba sa
in
sumay
his
ba.
good
Uni
time,
nang ma sumay ba.
when he failed God
Wa jen sa isoli na kanyo gaka ho ba.
as an old man,
Wa bude po nga ho ba.
every single moment,
Uni janggitan ni plak sal sumay rango.
David longs for intimacy with God.
Daud isol baksa ng tuwe ng remme janggitang na kaok siya ni
And this
donga.
morning, if there is one question I want to ask you, my friend,
Repeng ya pringa nang ko mengsas gani ko senggen sa mongode.
do you long for intimacy with God?
Angas naska naaba isol baksa ng tuwe ng remme janggitang na skama.
Do you long for a closeness with God?
Isol baksa chap chap ponge janggitang na nabas kama.
David was not only persistent in his intimacy with God,
Daud tara ndeke isol baksa ng remme janggitang aniyo kel gapa ba jot keng nakbasa nong aja.
David was passionate about his intimacy with God.
Daud isol baksa ng tuwe ng remme janggitang aniyo wa na mematsan gisnis chong mutani donga.
Think about the words David uses.
Daud ni zakal gapa kaptarang ni man sanchini bo.
I thirst for you, God.
Anga nang ko reng naska.
My whole soul longs for you, God.
Angni janggi nakna kaok siya.
My body longs for you, God.
Angni been nakna kaok siya.
I spread my hands out. I want you, God.
Angni jakrang ko badala rongan ang ko manas ka iso.
You see, David was not only persistent in his desire for intimacy with God, he was passionate about his intimacy with God.
Ansen ka Daud ra antani iso baksa ng tuwe nang reme janggi tanyo wa chikel baba jot kang nakbasa nung jandi ba giskos chong otani uno donga.
And I want to tell you this morning
Angaya prengo nang nai ko ganas
that
ka.
when you begin to walk in intimacy with God,
Zen salona isol baksa ng tuwe nang reme janggi tang na abat singa
everything changes.
plak kan dengtang na abat
When I
singa.
begin to walk in closeness with God,
Zen salona isol baksa chap chap ong janggi tang na abat singa.
when I begin to enjoy the presence of God,
Aro nga isoli dongpani nga katsa.
then the way in which I live changes radically.
Unon angni janggitani plak bewarang wa japang jadulunin dengtang na batsinga.
Number 1, David was persistent in his intimacy with God.
Angpa Daud uni sol baksa ng tuwe nang reme janggitan jot keng dakaba batkel kaponga.
Number 2, he was passionate about his intimacy with God.
Kani kapawa isol baksa ng tuwe nang reme janggitan uni giskonis chong motani donga.
Number 3, he was purposeful about his intimacy with God.
Gatam kapaw uni isol baksa ng tuwe nang reme janggitan wa magsongani donga.
Note what David says.
Daud may kwa kanay kuibo.
Who may dwell in your holy hill?
Nang ni rong thal ka pa brio sawa dong pagem ya kana.
At the end of his life, David says,
Aruni jangita ni bonkhang ka ba salango daud
that
agana.
I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Awa agana angni jangita sarang the pet anga Jehovah ni noko dong kham na man
You see,
gen.
David wanted to have eternal intimacy with God.
Nasimang uyama daud tara isol baksa dreng drop nang nungtue nang reme jangitang naska.
Lord, not just here on the earth,
Ya ga sako jangitang metengomang manguja.
but I'm going to be with you forever, O God.
Ani ba o isol ara nang baksan dreng drop nang gen ni wa
I
kana.
long for that intimacy with God.
Anga wan nakaba isol baksa nungtue nang reme jangitang anina kaoksia.
Number one, he was persistent in his intimacy with God.
Kangpa wa isol baksa nang tue nang reme jangitang jot khang nakaba tkel gponga.
Number two, he was passionate about his intimacy with God.
Gani gpa wa uni isol baksa nage nang reme jangitang chung utani donga.
Number three, he was purposeful about his intimacy with God.
Tham gpa uni isol baksa nang tue nang reme jangitang magsong chung utani donga.
And number four, and most importantly,
Aro pri gpa aro mongsong bat gpa.
intimacy with God only happens when we have a personal encounter with God.
Ya nakapa nang tue nang reme isol baksa jangitang isol kwan sing sakantini cha grong uni abatsinga.
David longed for intimacy with God.
Daud isol baksa nang tue nang reme jangitang na kaoksia.
David longed for a closeness with God.
Daud isol baksa chap chap jangitang na kaoksia.
And then as you continue reading Psalm 15,
Anseng gitrang number chibong ako poreng kude.
David says,
Daud agana
when you walk in intimacy with God,
zen salo na isol baksa nang tue nang reme jangitang na.
you begin to live in integrity in your life.
Nang ni jangitang ni isol ni aro mandinin kanyo kakhet ongay jangitang ni ba donga.
What David says in Psalm 15 is easy for me to remember in English.
Jeko Daud ya gitrang chibong agana angna English sigisrana na men altua.
Because I think of the one word. The word is watch. W-A-T-C-H.
Mana English si mengsa kata donga watch one WATCH ya ko gisra.
And as I read Psalm 15, I see the word W-A-T-C-H.
Aro nga deke gitrang number chibong ako poreon anga ya kata WATCH watch ko gisra.
Number one,
Skanga pa
look with me at verse 2.
ya consent pot kini ken.
A man who enjoys intimacy with God,
Je mandian iso baksa nung tue nang reme jangi
a
tanga.
woman who enjoys intimacy with God.
Je me chikan iso baksa nung tue nang reme jangi tanga.
Number one,
Skanga pa
his walk is blameless.
uni re rurani matnangani griyong a.
15:2, the one whose walk is blameless.
Chibonga pot kini wa kaketaka bauni re ruranyo matnangani gri.
Number 2,
Gani pa
his actions are righteous.
uni kham rangara strong gapanga.
Note what David says, who does that which is righteous.
Daud mai ko kana oba bebe ko daka kaket ko daka ne kana.
His walk is blameless.
Uni riani bajangi thani
His
matnang kima.
actions are righteous.
Uni khamrang namgpa strongpa nga.
His talk is truthful.
Uni agananirang kata jakalanirang kaket
Who
gapanga.
speaks the truth from his heart.
Wa uni kathongoni ko kaket ko agana.
The man who walks in intimacy with God
Je mande ni isol baksa nang tue nang reme jangi tanga.
is now living in integrity.
Wa isol ni aro mande ni nakani ondeke aro kaket ngai jangi
His
tanga.
walk is blameless.
Uni riani bajangi tanga ni ra matnanga
His
griyong.
actions are righteous.
Uni khamrang deke strong pa banam gapanga.
His talk is truthful.
Uni agananirang kata jakalanirang bebe ko agana.
His communion with people is gracious.
Uni mandes karang baksa nangrumanira kasani ganang
Look
nga.
at verses 3 and 4.
Pot set Pardon?
3 and 4.
Pot katam aro break koni bo.
His tongue utters no slander.
Ina kana antang sri chim takja.
He does no wrong to his neighbor.
Oni repeng banok sungsuna kusia kane kwagan
He
kolamja.
casts no slur on others.
Awa sungsuna kusia kanja.
He despises a vile man.
Awa namgija pa mandi ko mutsia.
He honors those who fear the Lord.
Awa mang isona kenga pa ko mandera.
He keeps his oath even when it hurts.
Antang na gumagni ngau ba wa namgija ko takja.
And he does not change his mind.
Arwa antani gisko nge dentangja.
You see a man, a woman who is walking in intimacy with God
Je miaro mechkan ki so baksa nang tuen ang reme jangi tanga.
begins to live in integrity.
Why solni aro mandin kanu khakhet tonge jangi tanga absia.
His walk is blameless.
Uni jangi tangani ra uni irurani matnagri nga.
His actions are righteous.
Uni khamrang wa namgpa khakhet bonga.
His talk is truthful.
Uni aganani rang khata zakani rang khakhet bonga. Bebe ko gana.
His communion is gracious.
Uni sakamra psa nang remani o khasani donga.
And finally, his honesty is impeccable.
Aro bon khamme uni bebe ongani ara mamang jiani gri.
Look at verse 5.
Pot bonga koni bo.
Who lends money without interest
Jian sup nantani tangkago botja.
and does not accept a bribe.
Aro kumutuko raja.
You see, the challenge that we brought for ourselves this particular time,
Nasimang uyama ya sa sumarang ansana rabiani de.
how can the Garo walk blameless?
Mai dake achek mandirang ara madnangani gri na mejang itana mangyan.
How can the Garo's actions be righteous?
Mai dake achek mandirani kham rangara namgpa strong pangyan.
How can my talk be truthful?
Mai dake ansani aganani kata zakani ra bebe ko kakep ko aganyan.
How can my communion be gracious?
Mai dake ansani saksang baksa nang remani ara khasani gnang ongyan.
How can my honesty be impeccable?
Mai dake ansani kakep tongani ara jiani gri ongyan.
And David says to us,
Aro doubt ansana gana.
and God says to us,
Aro isol ansana gana.
the only way you will have integrity
Nage isolni aro mandin kanu kakhet ongi jangi tangna ramade
is when you have intimacy with me.
na zen salo isol baksa ntuwe nang reme jangi tangna abasingel
Let me turn that around.
anga yako bakphale agan skana
A man who has intimacy with God
je manden isol baksa ntuwe nang reme jangi tanga
is a man in whose life you see integrity.
je ni wa nakma mandin jangi thanyo na ya kakhet mani ko nakta katam
And if
na
there is one challenge I want to leave with you this morning,
ya prumanga na simana mungsamang mangra biani ko donang na nang gen sumode
more than anything else,
plakrang na bate
I pray that each one of us here
anga pia yano dongi pansi sakang ti sakprak prakan
will long for an intimacy with God.
anseng sakang ti sakprak prakan isol baksan tuwe nang remejang itana kaos
Every
yang dongsina
single member of the Garo Baptist Convention
ABDK ni sakang ti sakprak prak bebe rago parangan
begins to walk in intimacy with God.
isol baksan tuwe nang remejang itana abatsing china
Our church will never be the same again.
andake onggen semode asini mondolirang pangnaba apsan taizoha
Let me finish by telling you a true story.
anga ongchong mutta golpo musawa gane machodatna
There was a young preacher.
saksa dambe agan prakba
He
dongachin
was struggling with his own personal failures.
wa uni kham kanyo wa chusok kijanirang baksa wa ngiyacham
His ministry was not doing well,
uni dangdeke onaniyo chusok jangiyacham
and he wanted a change in his life.
arwa uni jangi tanyo dengtangnas bingacham
This man was greatly impacted by a young man by the name of Robert Murray McSheen.
ya mandir robert mary mcsin pa mandeni jangi tanchi namen ara abeni ko mangba mande
Who
wa
was Robert Murray McSheen?
asya robert mary mcsin ara sawa
He was a man in Scotland.
yara scotland oni saksa mande
He
wa
lived only to be 30 years of age.
wade bolsi kolachi masan jangi thangaya
But in that short life,
ani biya kandak pegaba jangi thangani
Robert Murray McSheen turned Scotland upside down.
Robert Mary McSheen ara Scotland songko wad namen dengthangata ha
One of the most powerful statements that Robert Murray McSheen made was this one.
Robert Mary McSheen ni mangsa guang na man kijak pa agan na niya yang ah.
He said, God does not bless great talent as he blesses a likeness to Jesus Christ.
Ay so lara ndege changa sapani ko patiana batte anthan ta wani ko patin sa dalbata.
A holy minister is an awful weapon in the hands of the living God.
Ayya ndege isoni chakal ko man ka parong thal ka pa mandera isol na andangon ka pangwa.
So this young man went down to Scotland.
Wani ya chadambe Scotland onar yang
He
ha.
wanted to see the place where Robert Murray McShane worked.
Robert Mary Maxine pano kam kachim uko ya mande nikna
He wanted
ha.
to learn from him.
Wa unoni ko skir anas
He
ka.
wanted his life to be changed.
Wa andani jangiten dengthani ko nang nakiyachim.
When he came there,
Wa unonari bahaun
he met an old man.
bude pa saksa ko krung ha.
And the old man said to him,
Arya bude po na kana.
young man, what are you looking for?
Zong nara mai ko menga.
He said, I want my life to change.
Wa kana angang ni jangiten ko dengthatas
I
kinga.
want to have victory.
Anga chega pangnas ka.
I want to be useful for God.
Anga isona ga jakhal to ko pangnas
I
ka.
want to be like Robert Murray McShane.
Anga Robert Mary Maxine ka pangnas ka.
And the old man smiled.
Anon ya bude pa kadin smata ha.
And he said, I'll tell you how you can be like him.
Aru agan ha na ugata mai khang na man gen angan nas agan gen.
I saw Robert every single day of his life.
Anga Robert ko uni jangi thani sarang mukon ga.
From the time he was a baby till he died, I know Robert really well.
Uni bakatsa ko ani uni siana kengkengan anga Robert ko na men uya.
Come with me, I'll show you how you can be like him.
Ang baksa ibabo wa kata namat yung naman gen angan na bisok gen ya kana ha.
So he took him inside a room.
Uni man wa uko kuturi ye sauna ermang ha.
And he said, take a look at the ground.
Aru agan ha ya apa ko nibo.
You see those two indents on the ground?
Na ya pao damgani tepe nungo pa ko nagama.
That's where Robert knelt down. Why didn't you kneel down there?
Yanon Robert jasku depani bironga. Na aba ino mana jasku
And
depani
so the
niza.
young man knelt down there.
Ani gaman ya sadam beba uno jasku
And
depani
he
ha.
said, you see this table?
Uni zamana wagana ya table ko nakama.
This was Robert's table.
Yan Robert ni table nga.
You see the marks on the table?
Ya table o dagi dongarang ko nakama.
That's where Robert put his hands.
Ya dagi rangara jion Robert antani jasku ko nagi gatsa gatsam.
Put your hands there right now.
Na aba uno nang jasku rang ko daw gatat po niya kana.
Put your face in your hand
Aro nang ni jakrang ko nang ni mukhango don bo.
and seek the face of God.
Aro na isol ni mukhang ko ambo.
And the old man said to the young man,
Aro ya bude pa ya sadam be na kana.
I saw Robert on his knees,
Anga Robert ko nage jasku depan
his
na ko
hands
na.
on this table,
Aro ni jakrang ko nage ya table kata ko
his
na.
face in his hand,
Aro ni jakrang ko ni mukhango ka drama ko na.
often for 15 hours,
Banga sangon wa kanta chi bongarang
often
nage
for
donga.
12 hours,
Basa ko ba kanta chi gani anga.
before he came out and said a word.
Wa ndage dakani zaman sa wa isoli kata ko akan pramang kata.
The secret of the powerful life
Ndage blaki jangi tangani donu gaman bolde.
was a life of communion with God.
One isol baksa nang remme jangi tangani sa.
We want the integrity.
Ansi isol ya rumandi nagano kakke noi jangi tangaska.
How can the Garo church be cutting edge and changing time?
Mai dake ya atsek mondori ya dengtang roring pa sal sumerang na meli magat na mangen.
We want a walk that is blameless.
Anseng matna Greek pa namgpa rurani ba jangi
We want
tangaska.
actions that are righteous.
Ansni khamrang ni
We
namani
want
kasingaska.
talk that is truthful.
Anseng bebe ko kakit ko agana ko
We
manaska.
want communion that is gracious.
Anseng sakapra psan angrimani khasani kana
We
unaska.
want honesty that is impeccable.
Jiani Greek pa kakit tongani kansu manaska.
And God says there's only one way for that to happen.
Iso lagana andake ongnade mangsasan rama.
You've got to long for intimacy with me.
Naa ang baksa nung tuwe nang rame jangitana kaok sieni dongna
And as
nanggen.
I speak to you this morning,
Ya pren wangara semanagani on.
if you're sitting here saying, God, I need to have that intimacy with you,
Naa nang ni katong nagyakan dia oi so anga uwan na pa nang baksa nung tuwe nang rame jangitan ko nanga.
you talk to God at this time.
na ndaki wang ode taw isol baksa
I
kan
invite you
ko
to close your eyes and bow your head.
ana simung pla kon maksep china aro bambop china nga momolinga
We want to look to the Lord in prayer.
ayan sing biachi isol
As
chi
every eye
kon
is closed and every head is bowed.
at sa sakang